All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our first Ask Me Anything webinar, where we'll be discussing 2021 social media budgets and planning. My name is Vanessa Williams, and I'm a Director of Strategy at Ignite, and I'm joined by my colleague Lisa Brazil, who is an SVP who oversees our strategy, account, and business development teams here. A few friendly reminders before we get started. We have the questions you all submitted as a part of the sign up that we will be addressing. But if you have additional questions that come up throughout our time today, please submit them using the Q&A panel. Also, this webinar will be recorded and sent to all participants as a follow-up. And with that, we will go ahead and get started. We wanted to kick off today's session with a little poll question that should be launching on your screen now. We would love to just understand where your brand is with your 2021 social media strategy and plan. All right, we have a few initial results rolling in. Lisa, do you have any gut guesses on where you think people are?
I see the poll results.
Oh, okay.
So I have kind of an unfair advantage, but seeing some of it come in is pretty interesting. We have 0 people who are already done planning. So all of you in the middle of planning or haven't started planning yet can feel better that you're not alone in this webinar. There's others that are still doing it. Looks like we're 50-50 though. About 50% of the attendees right now are in the middle of planning, and 50% haven't started planning yet. So that's good for us, Vanessa. That means we have some insight that maybe others want to hear. It should be interesting today.
All right.
All right. So before we get started on our Ask Me Anything, we did want to share just some trends. We know the elephant in the room with planning right now is COVID and how that has really impacted so many different businesses, as well as your customer and their behaviors, and planning for that becomes even more challenging to think about. The messages that resonated before might not. And so as you're thinking of planning, really being cognizant that really is going to change how people are buying. We also looked at some digital ad spend growth by industry for this. And you can see, some industries are still projected to grow, and some are expected, and maybe not, maybe it's not that shocking that, entertainment or travel definitely took a hit. And so we, in 2020, and then maybe not as bad for 2021, but we do think that you have to consider whenever you're planning the vertical that your business is in, look at how your business has fared this year. And while there's still so many unknowns for next year, really taking into account some of those nuances that COVID probably has brought on your business, and being, I guess, real about what your needs are as a business can really be a good place to start when you're really looking at allocating budgets and making sure those budgets are going to actually drive the results that you need them to for next year. The other thing we looked at is just how important will social media be in terms of your overarching budget allocation. We did pull some eMarketer estimates. They anticipate a 7% increase in digital media in 2021 and a 9% increase in social media in 2021. These projections can be really helpful when you're looking at whether or not you should go for a budget increase for your business. Of course, you're going to have to balance those increases with how your business is doing. But this can be just some guidance. There are some aspects of marketing that are just naturally declining still. So we still see traditional media anticipated to decline by 1.3%. Also, the chart over to the left just shows that right behind digital advertising is social media marketing. And you can see kind of 11% of allocation across that channel. These are just guidance. This is just data that can kind of help you as you're starting to think about should I go for a budget increase? Should I not? How much should social be of my budget? Those types of factors. The other thing to consider is just the industry as a whole. So we did look at social media ad spend, whether that would continue to grow. We have some eMarketer forecasts for 2021, and you can see social network ad spending. So this is the amount of ad dollars spent on the channel will grow by 21%, and that's a growth of 11% from this year. So again, when you're looking at your social media ad budgets, also think about, some in the industry are really going to increase. And so if you do have competition, just making sure that you're funded well in that category will be helpful so that you aren't, your messages aren't missed. And then the other thing, everyone this year had asked us, what is the social media usage? And we saw a pretty dramatic increase of social media usage this year, 10% compared to the 0.9% growth that we saw in 2019. And so what this data tells us, as you look at 2021 and 2022, it's going to level off. It's not going to be at these high usage, this high growth. So the growth is going to be a little bit less. But still, we saw it this year. We know that people are using their devices more than ever on their mobile phones. And we still see the need for digital and social being a main part of that to really consider it in your planning. But luckily you're here, so you also probably see the need for social as part of that mix. And if you're curious how the networks are doing, this is just really interesting data. So over to the left, we have the social network ad revenues by company. And then we look at the growth by company. And this information is really helpful as you start to look at prioritizing certain channels for next year. You can kind of see what channels are predicted to grow. Obviously, Facebook isn't going to grow at the same rate as Instagram. It still has ways to grow in terms of platform and ad revenues. But some of the growth on that you see, while the ad revenues might look small over to the left, look at the growth over to the right. You see a lot of growth on Instagram specifically, LinkedIn, also Pinterest, Snapchat. Twitter. And so that information can be helpful as you're looking at maybe what channels you want to test and learn on, because they're obviously increasing some of their advertising opportunities. We saw LinkedIn launched a lot of new features that will start at the beginning of next year. And so if you are a B2B marketer, which I think based on the attendee list, there are some of you on there, you might really want to look at that channel a little bit more seriously because of some of these. All right. Now, Vanessa, talk to us a little bit about what trends we should think about when we're planning.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. So before we dive into the Q&A portion, we wanted to kind of leave you with 5 social media trends that we're really seeing pop. It's things that we have a close eye on and are recommending for several of our clients looking ahead into 2021. And the first one being shoppable social media content ad units, and really a stronger tie to e-commerce. I would say across pretty much all of the platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, they have really stepped up, their, shoppable experiences, launching storefronts, shoppable ad units, even TikTok moving into shoppable video. So pretty much every platform has their own version of this. And I think it's really just an opportunity for brands who have a strong e-commerce presence to really look to tying social media marketing to direct purchase, and there's a lot of opportunities. So if this is something that you haven't done for your brand and it does make sense, we would definitely recommend kind of adding some of these shoppable features into your 2021 strategy. You'll see video on here. That's probably not a surprise. We've been talking about video for multiple years now, but we couldn't leave it off because it just continues to dominate social media. It's still getting priority in the feed. We saw apps like TikTok and features like Instagram Reels take off this year, and really that short form video content just continuing to evolve. And we're seeing it generate really high impressions and engagement rates. Some of the highest that some of the platforms are seeing right now is through this type of content. And we can't leave out stories when we talk about video and short form content. Really now every platform has a version of stories because of so much success that was driven off of what kind of Snapchat started. So really incorporating stories into your content mix. We're seeing on channels like Instagram that sometimes that's getting more eyeballs and visibility than people are spending on newsfeed content. So stories and short form video should definitely be in your 2021 strategy. Number 3, looking at crisis communication or real-time communication. I think if 2020 were a year for this to have priority, that was it. Between COVID and social justice movements, and even as of last week's election, really social media marketers need to stay on their toes and really look at having a team in place that can adjust quickly to these trends and really read the room and understand, what are the conversations that are happening out there? Is my brand at risk for being a part of those? Do I have something to contribute, or should I kind of just take a step back and really take a look at what content I'm putting out there to make sure it won't be interpreted in a way that would, put my brand at risk. So really having a team in place, maybe with some PR training involved there as well, and having a plan if your brand does get involved in any sort of crisis communication, and looking into that for next year as well. Every year, more brands are advertising on social media. I think that data that Lisa just walked us through is evidence of that, which means that competition increases. And that means, it's going to be more costly to get space in feeds. So thinking about carving out a budget that makes sense, especially if you're looking to drive year-over-year growth, with which most brands are. So thinking about how, cost per 1,000 impressions, click-through rates are going to be affected. And then also looking at, some of the privacy implications that really started coming into the forefront this year, years past, and what implications that have on paid media targeting. We saw that Facebook is going to be moving away from their pixel, which is very cookie based, into a conversions API. And that's something that we're definitely recommending brands look into, so that way they don't lose that robust targeting capability that they've been used to. And then number 5, we added in Facebook fatigue. I think, again, with all of the heavy content and heavy things we've experienced this year, people are getting a little bit tired of Facebook, and they're looking to other networks like Pinterest or TikTok for just a break. They're looking for, entertainment ideas. They're looking for, DIY projects and things to do around the house, how-tos. So they're kind of moving away from, Facebook, and looking and exploring other platforms where they can reach their audience. This isn't just about, young people not being as likely to be on Facebook. We're seeing, audience just expand to other channels as well. So taking that into mind, a lot of social media marketers still put a lot of eggs in the Facebook, Instagram basket, but it's definitely something that's worth exploring, doing some testing and learning in 2021, and looking for other channels to really reach and engage your audience. All right, so that is what we have prepared. So we're going to use the rest of the time today to answer a lot of great questions that you all submitted in advance. And again, like we said, if anything kind of comes up as we're using the rest of the time today, please use that Q&A function within your webinar settings to submit anything real time. All right, Lisa, what do we have first on the list?
Okay, one of the questions is very simple. It goes, B2B Facebook ad spends, worth it? Question mark. So I don't know if you can speak to that, Vanessa, because I know you've done a lot in the B2B space, but can you speak a little bit to whether buying on Facebook ad or Facebook for a B2B brand might be worth it for them, or if they, should look elsewhere.
Yeah, it's a really great question. Honestly, we would say this varies by brand and by target audience. We would really recommend taking a close look at who you're trying to reach, and that really goes back to just an overall strategic approach of thinking about your target audience, where they are, what channels are they using, and thinking about, is Facebook the right platform to reach them on? We've seen a lot of success specifically with LinkedIn just because of the robust targeting with job titles and things like that. And other brands who are reaching more of a C-suite audience, B2B and LinkedIn is probably a better connection for them. So not to say Facebook isn't worth it, thinking if you have, specific parameters on, if you have email addresses, can you do retargeting off your website? Some other creative ways to reach the audience that, doesn't have as robust, job targeting capabilities like a platform like LinkedIn. It's worth doing some testing and learning just to see, what channel is being the most effective. But definitely we've seen more of a success with kind of LinkedIn. It is usually a little bit more costly, but we generally find it worth it because of the quality of the audience and the targeting that is on that channel.
All right.
Right. Our next question, how do paid and organic content complement each other?
Yeah, it's interesting because we got quite a few questions about paid and organic, and we get a lot on the business development side that I see a lot of brands still grappling with how much to invest in organic versus paid. And we think that really, paid should drive your business objectives first and foremost. It should be used to really reach some of those specific audiences, like you mentioned, Vanessa, that are just going to be impossible to get in front of if you don't have paid to support it. The other thing that we look at is we study the results of the organic. And a lot of times when we do our analysis, the amount of content that people are publishing on their channels is not generating the results based on the time and energy to create it. So you have to look at your organic content. If you've been producing it in 2020, we would recommend do an inventory of that, see how many impressions or clicks or whatever your business objectives were, and ask yourself, how much time did that take to create that content and put that message out there? And is it really reaping the results that you need? It still has value though, because there's a lot of brands that still find their customers might stumble on their page and want to understand what the brand is about. And so it can't be forgotten. And there's also other brands that have a lot of brand advocacy happening naturally. And they might want to use organic to really engage with that really enthusiastic audience that really wants to feel that connection with the brand. And so we see those two kind of working together. Obviously, the networks themselves also have different organic reach in themselves. And so navigating it can be a little challenging, but the data is definitely going to be your guide. And I think if you do approach it that way, then you're going to make sure that you're not putting too much emphasis one or the other. It's easy even to get too far into paid and forget organic. And so we would just advise that you look at that and really think about it in your strategic development process as well.
Yeah, like Lisa mentioned, there's formats and channels where you're still going to get benefits out of organic, such as story content. Instagram is a little bit better than Facebook. We're still seeing organic on channels like LinkedIn. So again, looking at that data, seeing what kind of the return on that piece of creative's investment is will help you just determine the balance of, is it worth the time and money? Generally, we really focus on quality over quantity and really identifying what are those key messages that we definitely want to get in front of people and making sure that paid is a part of that strategy.
All right, Vanessa, this next question is perfect for you because most of your job is building social strategies. So this question is, how do we start building a social strategy? It's easy to say, first, develop your strategy, but for some companies new to the social scene, and marketers trying to introduce them, where do we begin? Can you speak to where someone would begin instead of just saying start with the strategy. I think we've said start with the strategy a million times already. So sorry to ever submitted that.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And it sounds easy to say start with the strategy, but there's a lot that goes into a strategy. I think I mentioned earlier that we start with people first. So we follow Forrester's POST methodology as an agency, and we really try to understand who our target audience is and what we're trying to accomplish and how those business objectives align with what we're wanting to do in social media. So we really tie the results together. So when we say start with a strategy, we really try to get a good understanding of, who this audience is. We do a lot of research, both with, partners that we have, external resources, maybe any data that you have on your customer base, and understand, where they are on social, how much time they're spending, what do they want to hear from brands? What is their mindset when they're on certain channels? Because that can definitely change, what they're looking for on LinkedIn is not what they're looking to see on Facebook and things like that. So really starting with who these people are, do we feel like we can reach them on social? And then moving on to our objectives. So really identifying, what are we trying to accomplish with our social media marketing efforts, and really have direct ties to the overarching marketing and business objectives. That's generally where we see the best success, and really being able to tie those things together. And then we move from there, we move on to our strategies. Okay, what are we trying to do? How are we going to accomplish those three things? And down to the tactical execution of which channels are we using influencers, what are our content themes and things like that. So, a part of that strategy process is really doing an audit, like Lisa mentioned a little bit earlier, looking at, what things worked if you do have a presence, to kind of do a reset, maybe looking at if your competitors are on social, what are they doing? What seems to be resonating with them? And then from there, just kind of putting pen to paper, start getting some thoughts down. It's never going to be perfect. Social changes every single day. So we're constantly tweaking, our tactics and things like that, but just getting a framework down to start with who's our target and what we're trying to accomplish is a great place to start.
Yeah, and it's interesting for us because we hear it all the time. People come to us, and so you're not alone. People come to us and they say, we've been doing a lot in social. We're still not sure what we're getting out of it. And, part of our question is, well, fast forward a year from now, for your investment and resources and its budget, what do you really need to get from it from a business standpoint, and that helps clarify, because sometimes people will say, we want to really grow our community and have a base of advocates and drive sales. Sometimes those can go together, but sometimes, depending on where your business is and what really is urgent for your business to drive, you have to be really honest in the strategy process, because social can do a lot of things, and it can do a lot of things really well. But there's only so much time in a day. There's only so much budget that you can have. And you have to being more specific and more realistic sometimes is really good advice when you're looking at the strategy. It can really help there. So I think oh, wait, are you supposed to ask me a question?
That's okay. We can do whatever works, Lisa. I think this is a good build on what we just answered. Is paid social worthwhile for a small business selling to a specific audience? So talking about really focusing efforts and kind of drilling down to if it's worth it or not.
Yeah, so the question is whether it's social is effective for a small business.
Yep, and trying to reach a really specific audience, whether it's energy, oil, gas, so really targeted.
Yeah, so I think social is incredibly good at this. I mean, I think the advantage of it is that you don't have to have, a lot of these platforms don't have minimum spends really. And so you can really test things out and prove whether it can be scaled and whether it's worthwhile with a modest budget, and then add to that. And so for a small business, I think even when the Facebook boycott was happening, the Facebook boycott with large businesses, still didn't make a dent in Facebook's profits because there were so many small businesses that were invested in Facebook. So I think we've actually seen social media is great for small businesses. And specific to those industries, I mean, I think that that's really like what you said, Vanessa, being honest at the type of person you need to reach and doing a little bit of that research to say, really, where are they engaging in social? And where will they naturally find our brands? Like where do we think we can really reach this person? So think about those specific job titles, you know, and even the job titles might be an indication of what platform you might want to go and what targeting they offer to really reach and get in front of that person. And so, you know, LinkedIn can be really effective, really great. It might be a little higher cost we've seen, but at the same time, it's been really helpful at activating some really unique audiences. And I think a lot of people go to our website and they see all of these business to consumer brands that we list, and that's great. But we work with a lot of B2B marketers. We work in utility, we work in so many different industries that, you know, we do see the value in it. And I think, you know, I think it can be proven out for smaller businesses as well. All right, so I think we have another question. We're looking at, we have a lot of questions around how to determine a healthy social budget for paid campaigns. I'm not sure if you can take that, Vanessa.
Yeah, I'll at least try, but I think we're going to do a plug for future. We have our next AMA is actually paid social advertising. So please join that one too if we don't address any of the questions today. I think that will be really great with some of our paid buyers and our SVP over paid and analytics. So I'll at least try. So I think one thing to try to do is, you know, really plug in your audience into Ads Manager, whether it's Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever platform you're considering, and just kind of run some different scenarios. You know, if I had X budget, what is my reach or what do my results look like? If I had this budget, you know, how does that improve? What changes? And that's a lot of times what we do for our clients. We kind of provide some ranges, a good, better, best scenario, just so that that way they can make some educational decisions on, you know, what is going to get me for X amount of spend. And again, think ahead of what success looks like and kind of compare it to your other media and marketing efforts. You know, how are the CPMs landing? You know, what are the costs per click look like? And that'll definitely help you figure out kind of where to move the funds and what's going to be the most effective for your audience. So definitely use the tools, the Ads Manager, you know, those platforms to your advantage to just scenario plan. So that way you kind of have in your mind, okay, this is kind of what I could expect for a media investment of, you know, $10,000 or $100,000, whatever it might be. That will definitely help kind of manage expectations and help you kind of share it across your other marketing platforms and channels to do kind of a comparison there.
Perfect. Do you I think we got a live question. We're excited about the live question.
Yeah, it's kind of on the similar. So for paid, we let Facebook determine how much to spend. How should we think about our content differently, or is it worth the time to create separate content plans? That's a really good question.
Yeah, so how should you think about your content differently? I think thinking of paid and organic as completely separate is dangerous.
Yeah, 100%.
We have seen, you know, a lot of paid agencies focus on just very lower funnel and have nothing to do with the organic side of things. We've seen, you know, a lot of various different scenarios where, you know, you might have certain types of paid posts and then organic serves a different purpose. And the issue that we find with it sometimes is there really should be an overarching, you know, message and plan for that's holistic, that is driving against the objectives that you identify. And so with having those very disparate and separate, or even just letting the platforms, you know, I think this says, how do we, for paid, we let Facebook determine how much spend to push to Facebook and Instagram. I think really being honest with what you want this content to do and having a plan that kind of looks at paid and organic and evaluates the results collectively so that you can just make decisions in the next round of planning is really critical. And it doesn't matter how many agency partners you have to do that or whatever kind of internal construct is making it difficult. We have seen it all. And I think that there's a way for that data to be kind of unified together so that you can really get a snapshot of what's working, what's driving what purpose each is driving, and that you can make sure that that's really connected.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Lisa. I think sometimes we see that, there's sometimes two different teams like managing what's organic or maybe promoted posts and then who's just doing strict paid ads. And a lot of the times, those insights don't kind of transfer, between what's working well on organic and what's working well on paid. And there's just a lot of shared knowledge that can help the performance of both organic and paid when those two are seen as kind of a holistic strategy instead of, two different approaches. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, and Vanessa, so one question that we got is how do you decide how many posts should be boosted or promoted per month or per year? Can you take that one? I know that this isn't the paid webinar, which I'm plugging again. Join us for the paid webinar, but I feel like you could probably speak to that a little bit too.
Yeah, and another really good question. So I think we would recommend starting at looking at what you're getting at kind of a reach per post organically. I think that's a great start. I know we kind of touched on that a little bit earlier. And then look at what you're trying to accomplish in a given period of time. Are we trying to get people to the website? How much organic is doing that? And really look at the gap between, what you're getting organically and what, would support the business in terms of the objectives and goals you're trying to reach. And then you can kind of fill in and again, do some scenario planning of how much paid media would be ideal to get us there. And again, I know we talked a little bit about really thinking about quality instead of quantity. We really emphasize, creating really, really great content, engaging content, and then putting media dollars behind fewer pieces of really great content and letting that just really do the bulk of the work instead of having, tens, hundreds of messages out there that just aren't really driving much of anything at all. We definitely see efficiencies of that on the paid side when we just can run something for a little bit longer, let the platform optimize, let the message get out there to the audience. So would definitely focus on getting, fewer pieces of really quality content and putting, a good paid media budget behind it instead of posting every single day on Facebook or multiple times a day or whatever it might be. That strategy was great several years ago when organic reach, was still paying dividends on most channels, but unfortunately that's not the case as much anymore. So really working in kind of that paid strategy into that content is important. All right, let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about the holiday season. So what's the best way to break through the clutter on social media this season? As we know, everyone will be advertising on social and digital. Really, that's a good, timely question.
Yeah, I mean, we're right smack dab in the middle of holiday season, right, as we speak. And, typically we say, get your message out there earlier. Well, obviously, we're smack dab in the middle of holiday with so many retailers pulling up their messages before the traditional windows of time. I think this is actually going to be helpful for some marketers. There's traditional days we've told our clients to go, to avoid, like Black Friday, Cyber Monday. Well, now that's going to be stretched out over a longer period of time. So there might be a little less of what we saw before where there were very specific windows you wanted to avoid. Now, you still need to be on for those times for the most part. But you can figure out the ways to break through the clutter for your brand. There's a lot of COVID trends that you should consider weaving into your messaging. You need to be sensitive to the fact that this, messages that you've used before may not completely resonate with folks just because things do look a little different this year and we're not all sure how we're going to do our traditions and things like that. And so, but things like, being price conscious or thinking about creative media placements. So, and really monitoring your results, and so that you can make those real-time switches. We saw even for the election, we may have tamped down on our Facebook and paid and organic strategy for a window of time, but clients that had Pinterest just kept going. And I think, there might be areas that your brand can go that really make sense and can help kind of go where the inventory might be a little lower. And also, just think about creative ways that you can monitor those results and still drive the results. So what Vanessa said, we always know the platforms reward brands that get on the latest ad placement types. Mm-hmm. That's been the case since 2007 when we opened our doors. And so just making sure that those trends and how to get cost-effective results, even when, this is a market. So people are going to be in market. They're going to be driving up those costs a little bit. But I think because it is stretched out, it kind of lends itself to maybe not that influx and competition quite like what we had it, as well as other brands that just simply might not have the money to advertise or might not be doing very well right now. So all those things kind of equal themselves out.
Yeah, Facebook released, and Pinterest too, released some interesting data on the types of messages that are going to be more relatable this season. They talked obviously about shipping and delivery being a concern, so trying to guarantee, and really push buying early. They talked a little bit about how people are looking for small treats or rewards for themselves. Nothing huge, no big investments, but are really kind of looking for something for themselves this holiday season as, a little bit of a reprieve for getting through a tough year. So leaving in some of that message, maybe subtly, is another thing that, people are looking for. And then also just looking for convenient shopping experiences. The in-store Black Friday rush, probably not going to be there this year. So thinking about, how do we message? Are we open? What are the protocols? What does that in-store shopping experience look like if that's the case for your business as well?
All right, so it looks like we have another question about influencer marketing. So for a program currently without influencer partnerships, is there a percentage of all strategy that you recommend? And then the sub question was, what is your criteria when evaluating influencers to partner with? So I think influencer is definitely a piece of your budget that you should consider for next year. And the reason why I say that is because of what Vanessa shared about, these new ad format types and these different platforms that people are consuming on. Influencer, if your brand, is struggling with how do I really engage on TikTok, or how do I do reels? Influencers might really help you round that out. And so I think that could be, a great way of developing relatable content that that maybe your brand struggles to create on an everyday basis. It can also, in a COVID environment, help you navigate things like maybe your brand normally has photo shoots and those are not happening like they were. And you still need to diversify the content and the message and things like that. So I definitely see a lot of opportunity with influencer. And so the percentage of influencer is really interesting. It does depend on what you're trying to do, but there can be some influencer programs that can really tie in and complement your ongoing work. We have one client where we kind of have a hybrid program running where we do all of their owned content, and then we have an influencer ongoing ambassador program that generates a lot of content that then we leverage and package into our owned channels. And then we also have those influencers driving to the same business objectives that we identified for the brand. So it all kind of works together. It generates a lot of content. It also gets the message out there in other channels and drives advocacy that way. So the actual percentage, though, that's really hard because it depends a little bit on, how much of your budget do you need dedicated to certain things. And so if you're looking at how much you spend from a content production standpoint, you might look at influencers to help round that out or offset that. Or maybe, you have a media budget that you can also kind of plug into that and look at that holistically. So I don't have a great number on what the percentage could be. I've seen some brands have influencer be upwards of 75% of their social budget, but I've seen others have it more like 20 or 15%. So it really just depends, I think, on the brand and the internal resources and agency resources that a brand might have.
Yeah, I think obviously we always recommend starting with a test campaign, maybe setting aside some budget, see what influencer kind of, as it moves the needle, does it provide content or things that, you can supplement from other areas. So can start with a test budget and then kind of scale up from there as well if, if it proves successful for what you're trying to accomplish. All right, I know we have a couple minutes left, couple more questions. We have one on what types of COVID-19 related trends are you seeing across social? Another good question.
Yeah. Well, I showed some COVID information, but mainly, we saw that surge in social media usage.
Yeah.
Huge. That is going to level off. So it's just something to consider. But we are seeing just these different, and I think you mentioned it, Vanessa, just different consumer behaviors during this time. A lot of people are indoors. They're spending time at their house. They're also more active than some are more active. I can't say it's always me, but people are turning for how-tos, DIY. We're seeing that stuff really, people want to be inspired to do these achievable type projects. Pinterest saw some really interesting trends. They released those. We love looking at those trends that they release nearly every quarter. And that crisis support is just that you mentioned, Vanessa, it's not going away. Mm-hmm. There's a crisis every 5 minutes now. And we've been in social for a long time, since it really became even a blip on some brands' radars. So I think really thinking about crisis, thinking about those different content needs, are really interesting. And I think that's what brands need to really focus and invest in as they look into next year, because it's not going to go away, anytime soon.
Yeah, I think obviously a lot of people go to a brand's business page to see kind of what's the status. Obviously it's the location, have the store hours changed, things like that. And also just looking to, feel good content. We saw a lot of brands producing masks and just completely switching kind of their typical business to just support a community during that time. And, telling those brand stories about how they're giving back. So seeing some of that feel good content from brands and just supporting the communities that they're involved in is something else that we saw as a kind of a trend pop up.
Yes, I think this might be our last one because we're supposed to wrap it up at 1:45. But this is a live question, so we want to make sure we get it. But how should we think about boosted posts versus traditional paid campaigns? Is the main difference targeting?
It's another great question. I'd say targeting does play a role. You typically do have a little bit more freedom and a little bit more opportunities with, setting up paid campaigns as opposed to maybe just hitting the boost button. Also, we kind of look at traditional paid campaigns as, things we know we need to support, whether that's, driving people to book an appointment. These are messages that we want to kind of have in market at all times and really supporting the business. So making sure that, we have, we're out in front of people with these messages and driving kind of those key business results that Lisa mentioned earlier. Boosted posts also can play a role as well, whether it's supporting a key promotion or a specific content theme. But we try to devote paid campaigns, looking at trends, looking at what messages we kind of always need to have out there, whether it's a brand building message, whether it's getting people to book an appointment, getting people to buy something, dynamic ads, whatever it might be, retargeting. There's generally a little bit more kind of opportunities with some of those traditional paid campaigns than there are when you just kind of boost a post that's on your page specifically.
All right. And I know as we wrap up, we want to plug the last webinar. Do you have that?
Yes, I can reshare my
screen. To
let
everyone mark it on their calendars now. We will be having our SVP over paid media and her and our senior media buyer. So people who know the ins and outs of Facebook and social media advertising as a whole, they know it specifically. They're working on it day in, day out. That's going to be Wednesday, November 18th. So next Wednesday. Is that
That's right?
That's right.
That's right.
Wednesday. So see you guys next Wednesday. If you have any specific questions you want for us, we really enjoyed having this. We tried to get to, I think we got to nearly every question. If we didn't, we appreciate it and look forward to talking to you again in the weeks to come.
Thanks. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.